It began like a quiet family lunch in the small Australian town of Leongatha, a simple meal shared on a rainy winter afternoon in July 2023. The table was set with warm plates, home-cooked food, and the comforting smell of a Beef Wellington rising from the oven. Erin Patterson, a 48-year-old mother of two, had invited her former in-laws over for lunch. On the surface, it was a peaceful reunion. But within days, that meal would turn into one of the most shocking murder cases Australia had ever seen, a story that would spiral into tragedy, suspicion, and a trial that captivated the nation. The guests at Erin's lunch were people she had once called family. Her former parents-in-law, Don and Gail Patterson, both in their 70s, her former mother-in-law's sister, Heather Wilkinson, and Heather's husband, Reverend Ian Wilkinson, a beloved local pastor. Erin's ex-husband, Simon Patterson, was also invited but declined to attend. No one could have imagined that within a week, 3 of those 4 guests would be dead, and the only one to survive would spend months fighting for his life in hospital. The dish at the center of it all was a Beef Wellington, a classic British meal of steak, pâté, and mushrooms wrapped in pastry. Erin later told police she had bought the mushrooms from 2 different sources, some from a local supermarket and others from an Asian grocery store in Melbourne. She claimed she cooked the dish with the best intentions, but what her guests ate that day was laced with one of the most deadly natural poisons known to man, Amanita phalloides, better known as the death cap mushroom. After lunch, the 4 guests began to feel violently ill. Nausea, vomiting, and severe abdominal pain soon followed. They were rushed to hospital, and doctors quickly realized they were suffering from severe liver damage consistent with death cap poisoning. Within days, Don and Gail Patterson were dead. Heather Wilkinson died shortly after. Reverend Ian Wilkinson, the only survivor, barely made it through after a liver transplant. What began as a family lunch was now a murder investigation. When police questioned Erin Patterson, she appeared shocked and distraught. In her initial statement, she said she loved her in-laws and would never harm them. She even claimed she had eaten part of the same meal, though she later admitted she had scraped the mushrooms off her portion because she didn't like them. Investigators were immediately suspicious. Erin's story didn't fully add up, and the circumstances surrounding the meal seemed almost too strange to be accidental. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. Erin had been separated from her husband Simon Patterson, but they maintained some contact for the sake of their 2 children. Simon himself had fallen gravely ill the previous year, reportedly suffering a mysterious case of suspected gastroenteritis that landed him in intensive care for weeks. Friends would later recall Simon saying he believed his food had been tampered with, though he never pressed charges or made a formal complaint. That revelation added a disturbing layer to the case. As police searched Erin's home, they found a food dehydrator in a landfill, a key piece of evidence she admitted to throwing away after the fatal lunch. When asked why, Erin said she panicked after realizing that her guests had become sick, fearing she'd be blamed. Detectives seized the dehydrator for forensic testing, and traces of death cap toxins were discovered inside. The evidence was damning. By August 2023, the story had exploded across Australian media and international headlines. The small town of Leongatha became a hub for journalists, and the mushroom lunch became the most talked-about case in years. The public was divided. Was Erin Patterson a cold-blooded killer or an unlucky woman caught in a horrifying coincidence? The image of an ordinary mother accused of poisoning her own family was both surreal and sensational. Police spent months gathering evidence. They examined Erin's internet searches, her shopping history, and her relationships. They discovered she had Googled recipes involving mushrooms and had researched food dehydrators before the fatal meal. For prosecutors, this wasn't coincidence, it was premeditation. Erin, they argued, knew exactly what she was doing. She invited her ex-husband's family to lunch and deliberately poisoned them, perhaps out of resentment or anger over the breakdown of her marriage. Erin's defense painted a different picture. Her lawyers argued she was being unfairly vilified by the media and that her actions were those of panic, not guilt. They claimed she had no knowledge the mushrooms were toxic, and that she too had fallen ill after the meal, though not as severely. Her supporters pointed to her emotional interviews and her visible distress as proof she wasn't a murderer, just a woman whose life had been destroyed by a tragic accident. In late 2023, Erin Patterson was formally charged with 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder, including against her ex-husband Simon Patterson. Her trial began in 2025, and from the very first day, the courtroom was packed. The prosecution presented a meticulous narrative of planning, motive, and opportunity. They described Erin as manipulative and intelligent, capable of feigning innocence while committing a calculated crime. One of the prosecution's most compelling pieces of evidence was Erin's handwritten note found during a police search. In it, she expressed deep regret for her mistakes, mentioning that she had lost loved ones because of what happened. Prosecutors argued that this was a disguised confession, an admission of guilt beneath the language of remorse. They also presented forensic analysis proving that the mushrooms used in the meal were, beyond any doubt, Amanita phalloides. The defense countered by emphasizing that mushroom identification can be notoriously difficult. Many edible varieties closely resemble the deadly ones. They insisted Erin had no motive to kill, pointing out that she invited the victims willingly and stayed with them as they fell ill. They said she was scapegoated because she survived. Over several weeks, emotional testimonies filled the courtroom. Friends and relatives of the victims described Dawn and Gail Patterson as kind, community-oriented people who adored their grandchildren. Reverend Ian Wilkinson, now recovered, appeared in court to give a powerful statement. He described the agony he and his wife went through, how the lunch started with laughter and ended in unimaginable pain. His voice trembled as he said, "We trusted her completely." The courtroom atmosphere was heavy, tense, and at times surreal. Erin often appeared calm, taking notes or staring down at her hands. At other moments, she wept uncontrollably, especially during the presentation of photos of her deceased family members. The media outside the court reported every detail, from her outfits to her expressions, and online forums buzzed with theories. Some believed she was guilty beyond doubt. Others thought she was a victim of hysteria and a rush to judgment. As forensic experts took the stand, they explained how death cap mushrooms contain amatoxins, substances so lethal that even half a cap can destroy the liver. They also clarified that the toxin remains stable even after cooking or dehydrating. The prosecution argued this showed deliberate preparation, that the food dehydrator wasn't used by accident, but to preserve the mushrooms for later use. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. The prosecution asked the jury to consider the facts. Erin invited her ex-husband's family but not him, she cooked with a mushroom known to be deadly, she disposed of key evidence, and she had a history of strained relationships with the victims. The defense, however, pleaded for reason over emotion, saying the Crown had built its case on suspicion, not proof. The jury deliberated for days. The nation waited. On July 30, 2025, the verdict was announced. Erin Patterson was found guilty of the 3 murders and the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson read the decision. Erin broke down in tears, shaking her head repeatedly, whispering that she was innocent. She was later sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years. The judge called her actions an act of calculated malice cloaked in domestic normalcy. The sentence ignited debate across Australia. Some said she deserved to spend her life behind bars, others thought she should face the death penalty. Many were shocked by how ordinary the case appeared on the surface, how a family lunch could turn into a nightmare that gripped the entire country. After the trial, the story didn't end. Erin's lawyers filed an appeal, arguing the sentence was too harsh and that the trial had been tainted by media prejudice. Prosecutors countered with their own appeal, saying the 33-year non-parole period was too lenient for such heinous crimes. As of late 2025, both appeals remain under review, keeping the case alive in public conversation. The aftermath left deep scars on the Leongatha community. Memorials were held for the victims, Dawn, Gail, and Heather, while Reverend Ian returned to his ministry, still grappling with the trauma. Simon Patterson, Erin's ex-husband, stayed mostly out of the spotlight, though reports suggest he still struggles with guilt and unanswered questions. The case remains one of Australia's most haunting modern crimes, a chilling reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself loudly. It can sit quietly across the table, smiling, serving lunch. The mushroom murders, as they came to be known, blend domestic familiarity with pure horror, a reminder of how trust, once broken, can never truly be restored. The media dubbed Erin Patterson the suburban poisoner, comparing her to historical killers like Belle Gunness and Nanny Doss. But beyond the headlines, what makes this case so disturbing is its ordinariness. There were no guns, no violent struggle, no dramatic confrontation, just food, family, and fatal deception. Today, the house where the deadly lunch took place stands quiet. Neighbors say the atmosphere feels heavy, that the memory of that day lingers in the air. The victims' families continue to seek peace, while Erin remains behind bars, the woman at the center of a case that has left a permanent scar on Australia's collective psyche. In the end, the mushroom murders are a grim testament to how tragedy can hide in plain sight. It wasn't a serial killer stalking strangers, but a family lunch gone horrifically wrong, or perhaps, horrifically planned. The truth, buried beneath layers of fear and denial, may never be fully known. But one thing is certain, the story of Erin Patterson and the poisoned Beef Wellington will echo through Australia's true crime history for decades to come.